What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. And in today's video, I want to talk a bit about handling. Handling in car games has been a very interesting story from how cars came from way back in the day. Way back when it was basically a 2D game to, just pointing left and right on your little D-pad, to now being able to have so many different options, so many different settings for suspension, tires, steering, anything that you want, and you're able to make cars feel as realistic as you want them to with games such as a set of Forza, iRacing, stuff like that. You can make them feel super ultra realistic. People can have proper sim rigs at home and they can make games feel as realistic as they want to. Now in today's video, I want to talk a bit about Forza. Forza has gotten the handling game down for casual players. And this is a big thing because the casual player is the one that's going to be playing the game the most. And what I mean by that is you're not going to have the person with the $10,000 rig playing Forza Horizon 5 all the time. They're going to be playing something else. They're going to be playing something that's more competitive. They're going to be playing something that's more realistic. They're not going to be playing something like Forza Horizon 5, for example. But the casual player, the majority of the player base, will be playing a game like Forza Horizon 5, Forza Motorsport, whatever, right? These games have a now, I guess, new genre of handling physics, or I guess a new name for it, which is simcade. I don't consider Forza Horizon a simcade. I consider Forza Horizon an arcade game. Simcade is more like Gran Turismo. I think Gran Turismo 7, for example, is a simcade. I think Forza Motorsport is closer to a simcade than anything else. But I don't consider Forza Horizon, the series in general, a simcade game. It's an arcade game. Simcade, by the way, simulation and arcade kind of mixed together to create it. But I do see why people call it that, and it's because it has basically the same kind of options and settings and stuff like that those bigger games have, not bigger, but the more realistic games have, such as Gran Turismo, Forza Motorsport. But Forza Horizon, I think, got it down just right for the casual player and for the majority of the players. Now, I want to go back all the way to Need for Speed Underground. Need for Speed Underground 1 and Need for Speed Underground 2 had some of the best handling physics of their day, in my opinion. I think they had absolutely brilliant physics. You could drive slowly, or you could drive very quickly, and the cars will handle very well. And in Underground 2, you're actually able to tune your cars as well to change the way they handle, which was something crazy and something weird that you weren't actually able to do with a lot of games at the time. Gran Turismo at the time was more on, like I said, as a simcade type of vibe, and I think Forza wasn't really around back then, or if it was so tiny that nobody's really heard of it. But Need for Speed Underground 2, for example, back in the early 2000s, had a grasp on me. Like, it was just such a fun game to play, and like I said, it had just the right amount of arcadeness to it. Obviously, they made it so you can drift pretty much whatever car you want. So you could, drift your Lincoln Navigator or whatever. You can drift your Peugeot 206, something like that. Something front wheel drive, you know what I mean? Like, they made it so it's more arcadey in that type of sense. But when you're just driving around the map and you're just exploring and stuff like that, it just feels like a very natural thing to do. And then when Need for Speed Most Wanted, they completely changed the handling physics, and the cars just handle so much worse. Obviously, you can get used to a car's handling in a game. I'm not saying that the car's handling, wasn't good for whatever the game was. It was okay. You can still kind of tweak and tune a little bit, but not as much as you were able to in Underground 2. And again, here's the big thing. You weren't actually able to drive in that game slowly. As soon as you set off the line, you would just start wheel spinning and going as fast as possible. Like, that game just wanted you to go fast all the time. And, that's cool. It's an arcade game. They want you to do that. But since Need for Speed Underground 2, Need for Speed, I don't think, has created another game where the handling physics were good on. I'm sorry to say it, but they're just bad. It just feels like you're controlling a very soft block of cheese on top of some wheels, right? It just feels like that. And the reason why I say that is because the wheels on the ground don't really make any really connection to what you're doing. It just feels like what you're doing in the game is moving the car body around. Okay, so here's a big difference between Need for Speed and Forza Horizon, for example. In Forza Horizon, it feels like you're moving the wheels underneath the car. In Need for Speed whatever the newest one is, Unbound, but it has very similar handling physics to Need for Speed Heat and Need for Speed Payback and Need for Speed 2015. It's basically still the same game. It's just kind of more modernized and slightly changed, but it still feels like it's the exact same game as Need for Speed 2015, which is crazy to me that it's almost a 10-year-old game and you basically have the same sort of setup the entire way through for 10 years. Regardless, Need for Speed Unbound, like I said, it feels like you're moving the top of the car around instead of moving the wheels around, and then obviously the body of the car follows. That's the big difference, and honestly, it feels terrible to drive. It just doesn't feel very intuitive. I don't know if I need to counter steer or when I need to counter steer, or do I have to counter steer, or the game does it for me. I don't really know, because the handling physics of that game just don't feel right. That's something with Need for Speed Underground 2. If they brought back Need for Speed Underground 2 handling physics on a modern day Need for Speed, I guarantee you people will like it more. I guarantee you people will enjoy driving in that game so much more. And it's just, I don't understand how they've not like realized that people don't want these arcade physics where you've kind of just created handling physics out of thin air for people to try and play with, you know? People still want the game or the cars to react more normal. And I'm not saying this just because I'm Forza Horizon based. Gran Turismo does the same thing. Gran Turismo on the controller still feels like you're driving the wheels of a car, right? Like when you're accelerating, wheel spinning, the rear end slips from you, you get understeer, you get oversteer, the front wheels, you know, there's steering and stuff like that involved. Body roll and stuff like that also affects the handling of your car. Like there's still stuff that's going on where it just feels like Need for Speed doesn't have all that. Like I said, you're moving the body of the car around, and I just don't really like that. It feels a little bit weird. And there's another game that kind of does that, and that is The Crew. The Crew have changed their handling physics a little bit since The Crew 1, 2, and then now to Motorfest. So it's kind of going in the direction where Forza is, but it still feels a little off and it still feels a little wrong. The one game that's coming out very soon, which is Test Drive, is actually not bad with the handling physics. I have driven in that game. I have played one of the demos / alpha versions of the game. And even just from that, I can see how they're trying to make it definitely a lot more Forza-esque in terms of handling instead of like The Crew, for example, or Need for Speed. That definitely feels a lot more arcadey in that sense instead of arcadey in the sense that you can play it on a mobile screen. You know what I mean? So it's definitely a game that I'm looking forward to, that I want to try and play and see what it's like. There is one game that I didn't mention, and that is because I had a big, not big, but I made a big deal about this game when it came out, because it was a stupid decision from these developers. I'm sorry, but it just was a very dumb decision. And would you look at that, they actually ended up changing the physics for this game. So back in the day, Project Cars came out, if you guys remember that game. Project Cars came out, and it came out on all platforms, but it only came out to be good on a wheel. So how does that work then? What was the logic in that? You were still able to play it on a controller, but playing it on a controller was nearly impossible, because it felt like the game was not developed to play on a controller at all. And what I mean by that is, when you play a game on a wheel, you want your steering input, your throttle control, and everything to be pretty much one-to-one to what you're doing on the wheel, right? That's how it makes the game feel as realistic as possible. If you want a game to be good on a controller, you need to have a lot of assists going on. Even if you go into like Forza right now and you're like, oh, I always play with no assists on, you know, I play on a controller, I don't play with any assists on. I don't need that. I want the game to be as realistic as possible. Not even close, mate. Not even close at all. The steering speed that comes from the center of the stick on the controller to full lock to the left, if you do that on a controller, it'll be instant, right? And this is how Project Cars was like. It was like taking a game that was built for a wheel, and then instead of using the wheel, you use the controller. And that's pretty much what it was like. So the steering would go from 0 to 100 in like a millisecond, because of how you turn how you push the stick in that direction when you're turning. The throttle control and everything like that was just all instant. There was no dampening to anything. It was all just instant. And again, that's not how you build a game for a controller. I feel like these people that created the first Project Cars We're like, oh yeah, sure, we'll leave it. Let them figure out settings for their own controller settings and for however they want to play it. And honestly, people were trying and trying and trying, and even I tried, and I made a video on how to make it easier to drive on a controller back in the day. It was still bad. And Project Cars, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but it came out where it was a wheel-only game, technically, and it was also released on every platform, on consoles and on PC as well, which made no sense. Because the majority of your player base, especially on console, are going to be on a controller. You're ruining the experience of so many people. People won't want to come back to play this game because it's dog shit on a controller. You're going to have the very, very small minority of people that actually have a wheel, and a good wheel as well, to be able to actually play this game. And would you look at that? With Project Cars 3, they changed so much that you're actually able to play it on a controller. It was super arcadey on a controller, but you were able to play it. And you were able to drive it around, and would you look at that? It was completely different. It's almost like I mentioned this, like 2 generations of your game, and they ended up doing it in the end, where for whatever reason they decided, oh yeah, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna make it so it's playable on a controller. It's the majority of your player base. Those are the people that are gonna buy the game and enjoy it and want to come back to play it. You know, I don't make a game like stuff like flying games, right? Or games that you are able to fly in. Let's say if Battlefield came out and they said, cool, you can play around mouse and keyboard, you can aim and shoot and whatever, but as soon as you get in a plane, you can only fly that plane if you have a flight stick. Imagine that. Imagine you're not allowed to then get in a helicopter, or you're not allowed to get in a plane unless you have a flight stick. How stupid or dumb that would be. Imagine that. It just makes absolutely no sense to me. It makes no sense why you would create a game that isn't based for the people, or the majority of the people that play your game. You know what I mean? And now, going back to all of that, all the way back to Forza Horizon, I think Forza has created the best handling physics for the casual player, for the arcade racers. I think they've done such a fantastic job that it's very hard to replicate. I think some other game devs can do it. I think Test Drive is one of them that can get very, very close to it, because from what I've driven so far in this game, it actually seems kind of alright. It's not ultra arcadey, but it's also not as close to Forza as I want it. I hope it's a little bit closer to it as I want it to be, but it just isn't quite there. Regardless, I'm still looking forward to Test Drive, and like I said, I still think Forza has created the best handling physics for the casual gamer. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with me or disagree with me. I'm down to have a discussion with you guys, but for now, that's pretty much it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and I really do hope that you guys enjoy it. I will see you guys in the next video, and goodbye.